In view of that, the two bullets at the bottom state that hospitals that fail to obtain the New York State Department of Health recognized credentialing entities certification by the end of the New York State Department of Health regulation transition period, i.e. the end of 2 years, or who fail to share mandatory QA/QI patient outcomes data will be removed from the thrombectomy stroke center destination list. Right now, we expect that the implementation date will be sometime in the second quarter of 2019.
Okay, so again, this is a lot of work that was done by our stroke TAG and the New York City Systems of Stroke group to really develop a appropriate process for large vessel occlusion strokes, and obviously thrombectomy is the next step in that process. So our protocol has been approved, and now the next step is what are we going to do in the interim until the state designation goes into effect, which should take approximately 2 years. This is very similar to what we did with STEMI in the past, and I think it really makes sense, and I applaud Michael and David for their work on this project. Any discussion or any questions? Seeing none, we're going to have a roll call vote for this. So if everybody could listen for your name. Hold on 1 second. Dr. Winchell, thanks for coming. But since that you're walking into a vote, I'm just going to let you know what we're voting on because your name comes first on the list.
Oh,
So,
and I'm against it.
that's exactly right. So the REMAC is going to be sending out a survey letter to hospitals to identify centers that are willing to participate as a thrombectomy-capable destination. The criteria are 24/7 neurointerventional capability, agree to notify online medical control if you're unable to provide the service, already certified as a comprehensive stroke center or thrombectomy-capable stroke center by New York State DOH recognized credentialing entities, or with the intention of obtaining such certification, agreeing to share hospital patient QA data, and 24/7 neurosurgical capability. The two bullets that are going to go along with this survey are hospitals that fail to obtain New York State DOH credentialing by the end of the transition period will be removed from the thrombectomy stroke center list, and the expected implementation is in the second quarter of 2019. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. If not, Marie, go ahead.
Go forward?
Yes.
Okay. Dr. Winchell, in
Approve.
favor, oppose, or abstain?
In favor.
I'll say you for last. Nicholas Alexandru, Christopher Graziano, Kevin Munjal,
Yes.
Eric, would you?
Eric,
Yes, too.
Cindy Basilios.
Yes.
I can't get away with anything. Daria Gonzalez, Glenna Seda,
Yes.
Bradley Kaufman, Doug Isaacs,
Yes.
Nathan Reisman,
Yes.
Jeffrey Rabridge.
Yes.
Thank you. Louis Marshall,
Yes.
Michael Redlener,
Approve.
Pamela Lai,
Yes.
Laura Iacoli,
Yes.
Paul Barbara, David Benelli,
Approved.
Timothy Stiles,
Approved.
Mark Cantor,
Approve.
Charles Martinez,
Yes.
Joseph Bove,
Yes.
William Fisher, Robert Krupe,
Yes.
Jessica Van Voorhees,
Yes.
Arthur Cooper.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody. This letter will be, oh, Peter Wyatt.
I didn't call Peter Wire? Hold on. Why did I not call him? Okay, I must have printed it out this form, okay. Sorry, Dr. Wire.
Yeah, you don't belong here anymore, sorry.
We just
Okay,
took up
thank you very much, everybody. The letter will go out, it will be a joint letter from REMAC and the fire department as the operational component of this, hopefully within the next week. We will ask for responses within a month, so that hopefully by the next REMAC meeting, we have the bulk of the responses and a clearer picture on how many thrombectomy-capable centers there are. Thank you. David, anything else?
That concludes the medical standards report. The next meeting is on November 13th at 5 p.m.
All right, Dr. Redlener, Quality Assurance.
The quality improvement, quality assurance committee did not meet since the last meeting. We plan to meet on October 18th at 4 p.m.
That's this Thursday. Training and Education,
Next
Mr.
Thursday.
Next Thursday,
Next
I'm sorry. Training and Education, Mr. Lack.
Training and Ed did not meet either. Training and Ed will meet at the beginning of next month.
I just would like to say on the record that the fire department and Training and Education have come up with a very comprehensive and very detailed package of education for the stroke initiative. It is a really strong collaborative effort, and I really thank them all for their work on this project. Okay. Regional Council update, Dr. Krupe. Is there a Regional Council update, or they didn't meet since the last time?
We haven't had a meeting yet.
Okay.
We're meeting,
Good.
we're meeting on
Great.
the 23rd.
All right, CMAC update. Is he there?
I was there.
All right, I'm gonna let-
Let's know, right?
let's move
Okay.
on. Okay, Dr. Ravitch, the CMAC
All right,
update, please.
CMAC met on September 25th and 26th. Nomination for officers being accepted, they'll be voted on the January meeting. The minutes of May were improved. The SEMSCO bylaws are being revised. Dr. Langston is on this committee, as we would expect. Vital Signs Conference was discussed.
Okay.
SEMSCO meets 3 times a year. There was some discussion that it's hard to get the work done when they only meet 3 times a year. However, Mr. Greenberg from the Bureau Director said that there's rules in New York State that govern how many times councils can meet. However, the subcommittees can meet more often. So subcommittees will meet 6 times per year. In between each CMAC SEMSCO meeting, there'll be a teleconference, WebEx type meeting for each of the subcommittees so that they can continue their work between CMAC SEMSCO meetings. The 2014-15 trauma data report will be released in October. Opioid report will be released by the end of the year and should be reviewed. There were some grants, education for EMS for opioid patients, leadership development, EMSC for pediatric emergency care coordinators. There was a big discussion on that and getting people to fill those roles. And then EMS Standards of Excellence, which is apparently based on a Virginia process. DOH will create a newsletter to keep regions updated. January is the start date for the EMT critical care bridge to medic. The Bureau is working, the state's working in conjunction with Northwell as the vendor for this project. There'll be a whole program that'll be rolled out. Some of the training will be web-based. There'll be skills sessions that Northwell will collect the money, but then they will subcontract skills instructors for various regions to assist them in completing this training. The CME research program is being revised and will be rolled out at the end of the year. Changes to DOH staff, Mike Taylor and Tom Bahano have left. The motions, the New York City ALS protocols were approved. The NYPD ESU ALS task force protocols were approved and modified somewhat by the CMAT SEMSCO. They made some suggestions that the police department was happy to accept. Transmucosal fentanyl administration was approved, but as up to an individual REMAC to approve that. The fentanyl's already on formulary. The discussion was that this is an alternate route, but because of risk of diversion and issues with transmucosal fentanyl products, it's left to the region to individually approve an agency if they want to allow them to carry it. REMAC resolution for transporting patients with blood transfusion. This was a major discussion at medical standards, CMAC, SEMSCO. 2 ladies were brought to from the Wadsworth lab were brought to these meetings to present the blood and tissue folks' simplification of the process. I don't think they realized what they were getting into, but the simplification of the process was about 12 different forms, requirements that clearly would be difficult to comply with EMS. One of the big contentions was that they said No longer can you stick a nurse on the ambulance to transport blood. They interpret the transfusion license extending to the four walls of the hospital. So if you're at a rural hospital and you want to send someone with blood to a trauma center and you need the blood running to help stabilize them until they get to the appropriate trauma center, they said you couldn't do that unless you were a certified ambulance transfusion service. There was nowhere in the state where that could probably happen effectively. One of the other big sticking points is that you're required to have an individual agreement as the agency, as the ambulance transfusion service agent with each hospital that you would take a patient from. So you can imagine if you're a large commercial operator or if you're an aeromedical service, this could be 400 agreements across the state that you would have to have.
Yes.
There you go.
So
very
a lot
painful
of
process.
the feedback was given to them, some in a nice way, some in a
So nice.
not so nice way, but they received all the feedback, they're bringing it back. A small working group, if you're interested in this, you should let Mike Daly know, was put together to work with this and to meet with the commissioner. Apparently discussions that were had immediately after CMAC by the Bureau with the commissioner was that he was receptive to making this work and that the currently enforcing this, no, you can't have a nurse or a hospital person transport it would not be enforced. It was asked at the meeting what would happen if someone did it anyway, that you would get a letter. And they said, okay, and then what? Well, if you didn't respond to the letter in 10 days, you get another letter. But they made it sound like they would just send you letters, but unclear what the enforcement would be. So that's being, that was sure to come up again. Budget, there was a motion, REMSCO recommended a EMS budget of $6 million for state operations, which was similar to last year's budget. They recommended the cash ceiling be set at the budget appropriations, which would allow the full amount to be spent during the fiscal year. And then a Bureau of EMS budget of $14.5 million for aid to localities was recommended to be approved as well, with the same provision that the full amount be authorized to be spent. And the next CMAC REMSCO meeting will be January 15th and 16th of 2019.
Any
That concludes the
questions
REMSCO report.
on the REMSCO CMAC report? Okay, seeing none. Unfinished business. Does anyone have any unfinished business? Okay. Under new business, the bylaws group met this week. It was unfortunately not a successful conference call. We are moving forward and hope by the November meeting to have bylaws changes for review. And finally, Dr. Michael Arario, who is the medical director for the Mobile Stroke Treatment Unit at Presbyterian, does have a presentation that he has requested to show us on some new monitoring devices. So I'll just introduce the group from.
1 minute,
Yes.
before, I had asked Dr. Sater if he could just give us 1 minute of an update as to what's occurring with the
Leave behind.
Leave behind?
kids.
Sure.
Please.
Okay, thank you, good evening. We started the Leave Behind Naloxone program on September 1st, so we've gone through a full month. This was at the request of City Hall that we provide these kits whenever we encounter patients suspected of an opioid overdose, who we've treated and has successfully been essentially awake enough to accept the kit. So just looking at the numbers, it's interesting. We average about 10 to 15 calls a day for a suspected overdose, opiate overdose. We're leaving about 2 kits a day, it turns out. Interestingly, we've left close to 70 kits so far. 20% of the time, a patient actually refuses a kit, which I thought, wow, if it's free, it's for me, but that's not the case. 20% of the people don't take a kit. About 40% of the patients their respirations have increased. Maybe their alert and oriented status has gotten better, but not enough to be able to accept the kit. And about another 25% are those that just refused. I'm sorry, about 20% take a kit, 25% refuse a kit, 40% are not awake enough to take a kit, 15% or so, I know it's a tape thing, but we're kind of trying to tweak our data collection because there was nothing indicating that they had left the kit, and we're trying to figure that part out. So we need to tweak that a little bit. So, the mayor envisions that all ambulances in the 911 system actually be able to leave a kit, so we encourage you guys to do this as well. The kits come at no cost to you if you register with the Opiate Overdose Prevention Program through New York State. It's a pretty simple program. You need a medical director, you need a program director, and it seems to be working so far.
And I am working that out so that we are the opioid distributor, and anyone within the 911.
Narcan.
I mean,
That's a different program.
We're working on that part. We're working on that part, but we haven't gotten there yet.
If you don't take the Narcan, you can take the opioid.
That will be going quicker.
Well, that works. At any rate, I am putting together a package for the
We're also going to be a
non-municipal
weed dispensary.
agencies that work within the 911 system at no cost to you, so you will be receiving that information.
Any questions for Dr. Aceda or for Nancy? All right.
Just one thing I left out of
Yes.
this. One
Go
thing I
ahead.
left out of the CMAC REMSCO report is that the council and the Bureau congratulated Nancy on her retirement and commended her for her many years of service to the REMSCO.
Thank you very much.
Excellent. Okay, back to our regularly scheduled programming. So just for brief introductions, Dr. Lorario is the medical director for the mobile stroke unit. Dan Robato is the director of NYC EMS. Matthew Fink is the chairman of neurology at Cornell. Emil Smith is the business administrator for the Department of EMS. And in the back, Mike Koppel is something. Manager of operations. But you all have to just give him a hard time here. All right, Dr. Lorario, your presentation is up.
Who operates it tonight? Opioids.
And then just hit forward.
You can just hit forward. It's a PowerPoint. It's all set to go.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Joe, for that warm welcome. It's a real pleasure to be here today. We've had a real landmark month last month on our mobile stroke treatment unit. We actually hit a milestone where we treated.
Oh, Mike, just can you
There's
move to
camera
that side?
behind you.
We have the meeting is on public record. It has to be
Oh,
recorded.
am I blocking the?
Yeah.
I'll step
Just
over
that
this.
side. You're fine. Perfect.
And so we had a landmark milestone that we achieved last month where we treated over 100 patients with TPA now on board our mobile stroke treatment units. We've responded to over 1,000 dispatches. So we're really starting to make a great impact. For those of you I've been working with, I really appreciate the opportunity to work with you and to accomplish this so far. For those who I haven't had a chance yet, I really like the opportunity to get to know you better. I wanted to talk a little bit about something you've already discussed a little bit today, and something that we thought that the mobile stroke treatment unit could be potentially involved with. And I wanted to talk about a cerebral oximeter using near-infrared spectroscopy. You probably already discussed a little bit about this type of algorithm, and we're discussing using Los Angeles Motor Score as a clinical triaging tool to detect LVO in the field, get the patient to the appropriate center for the appropriate treatment, and the more accurate we are at doing this, the better it is for everybody involved. And there's a few options that we can do this, and it's starting to show that we're already having some impact potentially that could be invested in New York City if we were to do something which you already are planning to do, which we at New York Presbyterian think is a great, that will be a great benefit to the city. Having a hospital bypass system to get the patient to the appropriate endovascular center, I think is going to be very critical of getting patients to time-sensitive resources that are only available at a select number of hospitals throughout New York City. In both modeling studies and on a statewide implementation of a Los Angeles Motor Score bypass system, there's suggested benefit that this could actually impact outcomes in several different ways. It can reduce time to groin puncture for endovascular techniques. It could potentially decrease mortality and improve functional outcomes, and reduce the rate of secondary transfers and ambulance use time. So we'll be using our resources in a more efficient manner. This is pretty much what you've already discussed. Los Angeles Motor Score is a great tool. This is not LAMS plus speech, this is just the Los Angeles Motor Score, but it can be used with very good specificity, and then depending on the study, some varying sensitivity. But this is not specific to the Los Angeles Motor Score. Many different clinical triaging protocols, such as the RACE score, the Cincinnati Pre-Hospital Stroke Severity Score, and others, have low sensitivity, meaning that they can sometimes miss more mild strokes that may have a large vessel occlusion. And that's what we want to try and improve that sensitivity. So there's two ways we could do that. One is the gold standard. It would be great if this could be everywhere, but it's not. CT angiography would obviously detect a large vessel occlusion if there exists one. The studies here actually were performed on a mobile stroke treatment unit in Cleveland Clinic. They published this data, and Hamburg, Germany also published that they were capable of administering and acquiring CT angiography images on board a mobile stroke unit. The limitation, obviously, is this is not very applicable beyond mobile stroke treatment units. And even though we have the largest network of these units in the nation currently, it's still limited to just 3. So in comes what we're here to talk about, and I think we really want to get your feedback on this and hear your suggestions and get your expertise on how this could be used on a mobile stroke treatment unit. And we'll tell you what we were thinking. This is the Medtronic Invos device. This is what we would like to use on patients who are suspected stroke patients coming on the mobile stroke treatment unit. It's near-infrared spectroscopy. There's a monitor which will show, you see L and R stands for left, right, will show the regional cerebral oxygenation of blood flow to that area of the cortex, either on the left side of the brain or the right side of the brain. You'll see the sensors that are attached to the monitor go on the forehead, which is in the anterior circulation distribution right between the anterior cerebral artery and the middle cerebral artery borders in. So basically what we're trying to see here is if differences between a large vessel occlusion and the unaffected side can be detected on a near-infrared spectroscopy monitor, and if that can be used to detect that LVO in a timely, non-invasive manner. What I would like to say very specifically about this technology is it's not new. It's been around for a while. It's FDA approved for this use of monitoring regional cerebral blood oxygenation. It's used in various different departments throughout our hospital, probably others, but in New York Presbyterian we use it in our ORs, ICU, pediatrics, and internal ICU, stroke units in the emergency department as well. So it's a very commonly applied application currently in the hospitals. It's non-invasive, as I said. It's literally like sticking a pulse oximeter. The risks are just limited to whatever the sensors, gel or glue are and how that affects the skin. It's easy and rapid to teach. It's very quick, 5 minutes to teach and very short to apply. And it's immediately interpretable. As soon as you hook up the sensors and turn on the machine, you'll start to see those oxygenation levels. And this could be incorporated into clinical practice on MSTUs. So here's actually a study that was published earlier this year in the journal Stroke. It was done by the Kaiser Permanente group, where they used this exact same device in suspected stroke patients. They had large artery occlusion, LAO. They had also patients with non-large artery occlusion stroke, which is SAO, or small artery occlusion, or lacunar infarction, cerebral hemorrhage, and non-stroke. And what you can see in this sample, which was done in the emergency department at Kaiser Permanente hospitals, is that large artery occlusion stroke has a difference in the regional oxygenation saturation that you're seeing on the side of the LVO. So in an instance, for instance, these patients here, where there's a negative 20% difference between the sides, that would be the difference of an 80% to 60% oxygenation. So actually very good. And you can see the sensitivity would be pretty good too, in that many of these values, if not all of them, are at least below 0, except for that one outlier. And what's incredible is that we really are detecting LVO. If you look on the right side, they did this study both before and after endovascular treatment in patients with confirmed large vessel occlusion. Before endovascular treatment, you see the obvious discrepancy in the regional oxygenation saturation. After endovascular treatment, that normalizes. So it's showing the effects of endovascular treatment on that large vessel occlusion, and it just confirms that we're actually measuring what we're setting out to measure. They also, on the same patients in the same study, looked at a clinical score. Now, it's not LAMS plus speech, but it's somewhat close. They had the face, the arm, and the speech, but they also added gaze and used GFAST. Along with the clinical score, you can see that the sensitivity and specificity are good. They're moderate. But when you add in, let me fix that. Alone, the LDO detection with the Medtronic Invoice device is good. It's moderate without the addition of the clinical score. But this is just one data point. When you add the clinical score, we have very good specificity, very good sensitivity. And when you look at the top values, the sensitivity in particular is high, which is what we're looking for, to have more sensitive testing. So this is not something that's meant to replace what we're currently doing. It's a tool that's non-invasive that could be used in conjunction with what we're doing. But we need more data. We need to gather some data and see how this is affecting real patients in the pre-hospital setting. Because as I said before, this was all done in the emergency department. And I've learned very quickly in the last couple of years that dealing with patients in the pre-hospital setting is a very different animal. So what our proposal is, and this is loose, this is up obviously for your feedback, your suggestions, what your interpretation is, and we're very open to that. How we can potentially do a QA project to evaluate these non-invasive, FDA-approved, potentially useful diagnostic modality for our stroke patients in New York City, and just study it on our MSTUs. We would like to do this starting next year. We would definitely get IRB approval at all of our NYP sites where we have a mobile stroke treatment unit. That would be a must, in our opinion. And then we would ask the question, what other approvals we would need from you in order to accomplish this shared objective. We would like to equip this on all our MSTs. I think that would give us the volume in a faster amount of time to get the number of LDO patients that we would want to get an adequate sample to really study this and help us out with whether this is a useful modality to continue studying and continue using. There's several measured outcomes that I have suggested here. There's obviously others that we can add to this list. And I want to assure you that this will not interrupt any standard MSTU processes or workflow. This will not delay things. We are not going to use this for any clinical practice during this project. It's really for us to gather data in a way that is safe for the patients, and hopefully in the future can find a way that we can help them. So I believe that's all the slides I wanted to go through. There's a summary up there that just summarizes, again, what I've already said, but I want to thank you again for your partnership in this. We're only successful because we have strong collaboration. We really want to continue that and continue to innovate in stroke research and do good for the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mike, thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions? Yes.
Would there be an intent to publish this data at some point?
Yes, most likely.
Okay. I only raise that because, as you know, the definition of research is generalizable knowledge, and as a result, a study of this type would absolutely require IRB approval before it could go forward. So.
Absolutely agree. Yeah, we would submit this at, it would be 3 institutions, actually 4 institutions, IRBs, that all are participating in NYP hospitals. And we'll be more than happy to share those protocols with the group.
Thank you.
If I could ask the question of the group,
Yeah.
is there, one reason we presented this was to find out if there's a sort of, is there an IRB connected with this group that we need to submit it to? In addition, I mean, we'll submit it to the IRBs of our hospitals, but does this group need some type of submission
So-
to get
There is no specific IRB for this group. Any project that comes that is operating on ambulances in New York do need to go through an IRB if it's for research purposes, but that's the only requirement.
well, that we certainly will do.
Right.
So,
Would you still
have to present to the state?
So we actually, well, let me let Jeff talk and then.
So, first question is, this device is FDA approved, yes?
Correct.
Okay. You will not be changing the protocol that currently exists, you would just be using this device in addition to gather data, or would you be altering your protocol at all?
When you say altering our protocol, you mean our
What's
mobile stroke
currently being
protocol?
done in the multiple stroke unit to treat the patient?
No, the only thing that would be changed is after the CT scan is acquired, this monitor would be applied by one of our clinical staff members, and then we would use that data and abstract that data.
Right,
But
so I think
that's
if,
it.
it's a research project, you have IRB approval, and you're not changing the treatment currently
Right.
being given,
Correct.
I don't know that it needs any approval on our end or
Sure.
from CMAC.
I think, yeah.
But any study though, it was a couple of years, right? Any study has to go to the state for approval.
So any study that involves a change in our protocol, a
Demonstration.
demonstration project where we're introducing a new skill or a new technology would have to go in front of the IRB. This is would have to go in front of the state. This is an FDA-approved device, and as long as they're not changing clinical practice, my understanding is it would not need to go to the state, because there is no change to clinical practice at all.
Is that the approval for out-of-hospital use?
No, it's for measuring regional cerebral oxygenation. So it's the general use that we apply it for. It's not limited to any specific site or location.
Art, and then Lou.
Yeah, I think it's the wisest thing to run this by the state, that, you know, their thought process about issues such as this, you know, is
Sure.
always an evolution. You know, best that we, inform them of the project going forward, or that we've approved it, that it's IRB, that it's going to be IRB approved, and, so long as they then are informed in advance and have no objection based upon the criteria that you mentioned, I don't see that there'll be a problem, but that way we'll forestall any issues that could arise.
I agree. I think that notifying the state would be wise and would be prudent.
Joe,
1 second. Lou, did you have your hand up? No? All right, Joe.
I guess I don't understand why we can give information to the state, but you're just taking an FDA device and putting it on a patient in an ambulance and not changing anything. We can do that now with any patient.
So I would
So we can
suggest
give
just,
information to the state,
Yeah.
but it should not
Right.
stop the
so
IRB
I would
approval and
suggest
process.
in that manner, a letter to the Bureau saying this is what we intend to do, this, just
Bingo.
notifying you
It's
that we're doing
approved,
this.
it's
I don't
FDA
think,
approved.
right.
We can put it on, you were here at the meeting, Joe, right now.
It might be
They
low.
would see a problem. They would see,
The reading would be very low.
there would definitely be a difference, and it would be bad. I'm sorry, Doug, and then Mike.
I was just add on, it was just a notification to the state. Remember several years ago, it became a requirement. It's not seeking so much of approval,
Got
but a notification to the state.
Sure.
But it's still a process that was started about 5 years ago. So just we continue
Yeah.
whether it's changing.
Can't hurt.
No, I agree. I don't think there's anything that would stop, that should stop us from letting the state know that we're doing this and that this is something that the region has reviewed. Questions? Joe? Oh, look, Mike?
No, I would just say that, in general, whatever the bureaucratic hoops that we have to jump through, I think it's probably reasonable that we should support this project in so much that we're looking for an EKG for a stroke. And we want to do the best that we can to identify patients who can benefit from, reaching a specialty hospital for treatment of LVO stroke. And so this type of project, I think, is important. And, I just urge you to consider how it affects the patient care in the ambulance. I would urge you to, consider all of the elements of, speed and efficiency that need to occur at the same time. But I think that this type of project will probably happen more and more because we're looking for that answer. So thanks.
David and then Kevin.
Just a couple of questions. I agree with Michael. How long does it take to actually obtain a reading from this device?
Within 30 seconds of being
So
applied,
seconds.
it just adjusts and then, yeah, it's
And,
very quick.
Now, you said you were gonna compare this to the CAT scan? You're gonna first do a CAT scan and then compare it?
What we could do as the gold standard, as we're validating it in the pre-hospital setting, is CT angiograms that are done at NYC facilities will have access to that data of whether or not there's an actual LVO confirmed, and then we will compare the results.
No,
from
the
the
reason I'm
study.
asking, Michael, are you planning to do CT angels on the ambulance?
No, this is not what we're discussing now. No. I know I had the slide on it, but I just wanted
That's good, I guess. It
to
takes
talk
a lot
about
of
the
time.
options for triaging in the field. But that's not what we're planning on doing.
And how much is how much does a device like this cost?
The cost is around $20,000.
Kevin and then Jess.
So I have no problem with this research. I think it's a great project. For our purposes, as for EMS oversight for the region, I'd appreciate if maybe Doug, you could share what was ever approved language that the state recommends in terms of reporting research. The reason I bring that up is I think that there's a lot of projects that happen, resident projects, all kinds of little projects, that stuff. So the point is that we should understand very clearly, refresh our memory as to what is required to be reported, what's not. And I actually would think that something like this probably, if we actually looked at the definition, I don't know, might not need to be reported. And if it didn't need to be reported, we should lower the barrier to research.
Right.
We shouldn't have to always go through all these hoops we don't need to. So all I'm asking for is for this group to review what the requirements are,
I think we should
get on the
Hold
same
on.
page.
One at a time. So, Jess and then Peter.
To address that, again, just reiterating, research projects that we've done in the past have required temporary protocols, essentially, research protocols that we've put into place, and that needs to pass REMAC and then CMAC. So that's why we've taken research protocols or demonstration projects and taken it through this body and then sent it to the state for approval
Correct.
in the past. Sometimes those become permanent protocols, obviously based on the outcomes. This looks like a great study. Obviously, the headache that Dr. Redlener et al. Had in finding an appropriate pre-hospital tool to look for LVO strokes, this is something that is a great area of research.
Peter?
I gather that the idea here is to use the NERS in conjunction with the clinical score, which gave a lot more impressive performance stats. But the clinical score then would require, who does that? And is there training involved? And do you need to consider things like observer reliability within this context, which might be different from what it would be in an ER, for example?
Yeah, that's a great question. We've already been collaborating with some of the REMAC members on this project. We've been collecting clinical scores, data on all our mobile stroke patients from inception. We have our nurse and neurologist via telemedicine, respectively, adjudicating several of these clinical stroke severity scores, including the Los Angeles Motor Score, which we most recently added to the list. All the neurologists are very well trained in doing this, and they're the ones who are documenting in their electronic health record.
So there's a neurologist on
It's
the
a well, the neurologist is via telemedicine. They're remote, but connecting to a nurse who's performing an exam remotely.